It's episode 13. This week, The Balance of Terror. Classic episode this week. Well, basically, there's going to be a wedding on board ship. The never before seen Angela Martin and Mr. Timmelson are about to get married. And all of a sudden, just before the ceremony, Captain Kirk gets word that a bunch of star bases are being radio silent. They were trying to get in touch with him. Radio silence. So he's like, well, that's odd, but I'll do this wedding ceremony. Halfway through, red alert happens. The other star base is under attack. Well, they rush over there. Come to find out, it's the Romulans. They hadn't seen or heard of the Romulans in 100 years. Nobody knew what a Romulan looked like because they didn't have the technology at that point to see them. Then somehow they just magically had access to cameras inside the Romulan ship, and they looked and they're like, well, it looks like Mr. Spock. And then the navigator got super racist. He was like, well, Mr. Spock must be a Romulan because he looks like them and they look like him, so I'll just be really inappropriate to my commanding officer here. Kirk wasn't happy. Mr. Spock, the entire episode, just looked dejected, sorry, you must be completely right that I'm on the side of the Romulans just because I have pointed ears. He looked dejected. I don't know if he would fly in 2019. He probably would have said something. But he did not. And then the Romulan ship and the Enterprise kept fighting it out, firing phasers for this one episode. There was 20 steps to fire the phasers. You had to tell 18 people to fire the phasers. Yet Lieutenant Uhura could open hailing frequencies from anywhere on the bridge. She took over navigation at one point, had the hailing frequencies open. I'm like, but you're 25 feet from your station. How'd you do that? But yet the phasers, you had to push a button, call the phaser room. Phaser room had to call a person. That person hit another button, then called back to the first person who called to the bridge, and then that person talked to the guy that hit the button to begin with. Only time in the history of the show that was a complicated chain reaction to fire a phaser. Every time else it was pretty simple. You just pushed a button, the phaser's fired. But not this week. Not in Balance of Terror. But, the phasers kept giving way, circuits kept exploding. The navigator said he had experience in the phaser department when, as Mr. Scott said, nobody else was available because apparently they all had coffee breaks during a battle. They all said, sorry, we're on break, except for Timmelson. So this navigator, he goes down there to help out, and then poisonous gas just floods the room for no apparent reason whatsoever. Kirk screaming, it's like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Fire the phasers, can you hear me? Mr. Spock turns and he does this really awkward looking run down the corridor, gets to the room, pulls one guy out, gets the phasers fired by just pushing random buttons as he's walking blindly away. He's just pushing buttons like that, and the phasers fire. I don't know if that's how it works, but it happened. Then the lead commander of the Romulan ship blows his own ship up. Kirk said, we'll beam you all over and we'll take you to a POW camp and everything will be fine. He's like, nah, I'll just blow myself up with a nuclear warhead apparently. And so he did. Even though his ship stayed completely intact on screen, and he just threw his hands in the air and made a grimacing face. Apparently that was self-destruct on a Romulan ship. Grimacing face, hands in the air, ship stays intact. That's not how nuclear weapons usually work, but it did. Apparently the guy that was going to get married, Timmelson, only person on the entire crew that died. Only casualty. Kirk tells his fiancée, hey, sorry, and she's like, it's okay. It's alright. And she just walked on to perform more duties, apparently. She was fine with it. Some interesting notes in this episode. First time we saw the Romulans. First time the neutral zone was referenced. First time Remus was mentioned. And it was the first appearance of Mark Leonard, who went on to play Spock's father, Saavik, in future episodes of the original series and the movies and in Next Generation. Yeah. He was all over the place. Played a Romulan commander in this episode. He played a few different species over the course of Star Trek. This was his first appearance. Also, all the regulars were on this particular episode. Everyone you would think of. We went through like a Navigator of the Week phase again, because this Navigator was never seen after this. He was probably demoted and kicked off the Enterprise for being racist towards Spock. Even though Spock saved his life later, and he's like, Spock saved my life, I can't believe it. And Spock's like, save the trained navigator. Because why not? Didn't save Timmelson. Didn't save him. Didn't pull him out of the room before he started blindly pushing random buttons. It's like, I'll save the trained navigator, because that guy's not a trained navigator. Let him go. Just let him breathe the toxic gases that are flooding the room for no reason whatsoever. It was also the first example in an episode where they didn't know how space worked, because both ships pretended that if they were completely silent and whispered to each other, the other ship couldn't find them. They're like, they'll never know we're here because we're whispering really quietly, so they won't know. It's the vacuum of space. They wouldn't have known anyway. You could have been pounding on a bass drum, and they wouldn't have known the difference in space. They couldn't hear that. But they forgot how space worked, apparently. And Spock accidentally hit a button when he was pulling himself up from fixing the damaged circuits of the phasers, which were on the other side of the ship from where the phasers are fired, which wasn't explained. And he pushed that random button. Everyone freaked out. They're like, oh no, they heard that random button being pushed. But they could have not. They could have not heard that. So, pretty much that was what happened in Balance of Terror. Next week, surely we'll find out what happened with Angela Martin, because she's in that episode too. Look forward to that.